Day. My name is Dawn Lees Regis, and welcome to my presentation, Symbols and Images of the Feminine. This project encompasses 8 separate presentations designed to share with the viewer how women have been represented in art through the ages. They are goddess, temptress, flora, fauna, and food, idyllic and fragile, death and martyrdom, lust and voyeurism, pinned up, pinned down, and pain, and vagina dentata and the fear of the feminine. Why, you might ask, should we care about how women's images are portrayed in art? Because seeing is believing. We believe what we can be based on what we see. We define our lives around what we see and hear. We dream and imagine and make plans based on the examples that we're presented with, and we must pay attention to what we feed our souls through our eyes and our ears. Artists create from their own level of understanding. They imbue their work with their life circumstances, with their fears and concerns, and with their own specific experiences. In each presentation, I will share some images, give you a little background on the work, and tell some stories where it seems important. And I'll do my best to present without too much judgment. And so, let's begin. I will give advanced warning that there are some difficult images in this presentation beyond the regular nudity often found in art, and probably not appropriate for anyone under 16. Pinned Up, of course, looks at the ever-popular pinup girl of girly magazines. Pinned Down is a look at aggression against women. And Pain is just that, pain inflicted upon women and pain felt by women. One of the earliest pinup girls is the nude Maja, commissioned by an important political figure of Spain. Nude paintings such as these are rare since there were dire consequences to be expected from the members of the Spanish Inquisition. So these commissions were hung in separate cabinets reserved for private viewing. This painting is renowned for the straightforward and unashamed gaze of the model towards the viewer. It has also been cited as among the earliest Western artworks to depict pubic hair without a comparison to prostitutes. The thing that bugs me the most about this painting is the way the breasts are rendered. They look as if they fell off and were clumsily reattached. Since women's nudity was against the law, many artists used male models and reimagined them as females. I don't know if that's the case here, but the practice would make the understanding of breasts by those who don't have them a bit difficult. For this painting, Olympia was painted as a modern-day courtesan, confrontational rather than seductive. Like the nude Maja, her frontal gaze challenges the viewer, and critics claimed that Venus had been portrayed as a prostitute because a modest woman would not dare look you in the eye. Symbols of wealth and sensuality are the black ribbon around the neck, a gold bracelet, Louis XV slippers, and a maid. The black cat at the end of the bed is a symbol of promiscuity, not to mention the flowers that were probably a gift from an admirer. Peruvian artist Joaquin Alberto Vargas y Chavez moved to the United States in 1916 after studying art in Europe, Zurich, and Geneva. He said the biggest influence on his work was the cover of French magazine La Vie Parisienne. Between 1940 and 1946, Vargas produced 180 paintings for Esquire magazine, known as Vargas Girls. His paintings and color drawings were periodically featured in some issues of Playboy magazine in the 1960s and 70s. 2 examples are seen here with the usual cutesy quips that are designed to make women look stupid. The death of his wife Anna May in 1974, who was his model and business manager, left him devastated and he stopped painting. In 1978, he partially came out of his self-imposed retirement to do a few works, such as the Candy-O album cover for The Cars. Pop art takes its inspiration from pinup girls, girly magazines, and pornography, and images that are produced in multiples as a way to sell products. Of all the art styles that had arisen since the war, pop art, and especially American pop, was the one that seemed to mesh most successfully with the society that produced it. Most critics of pop art at the time complained about the mechanical and commercial aspects of the work and mourning the loss of the artist's self as part of the work. Clearly, the least acceptable aspect of the pop art movement in general is its conspicuous streak of male chauvinism. Almost everywhere they appeared in pop art, paintings, or sculpture, women were represented as mere objects. Mel Ramos is best known for his paintings of superheroes and voluptuous female nudes emerging from cornstalks or Chiquita bananas, popping up from candy wrappers, or lounging in martini glasses. He was also a university art professor. Philippine-born, Guam-based artist Snyder Macareg states that he has always been inspired by the female form and believes they are the epitome of fine art. Snyder obtained his bachelor's in fine arts from the University of Guam. Snyder says of these two pieces, "I wanted to portray a more literal sense of women influencing each other in the both positive and negative ways, the telling of which can be noticed by the expressed demeanor of the larger figures, one in a glazed stupor and the other in a more dismissive pose." This is a sculpture, not a painting, and its depiction of an overly thin, anorexic-looking female harkens back to the age-old opinions on beauty. John DeAndrea was from the hyperrealism school of art and specialized in nudes, which he made from plastic, polyester, fiberglass, and natural hair. Here's what Alan Jones said about his artwork of the time. "Fetishism and the transgressive world produced images that I liked because they were dangerous. They were about personal obsessions. They stood outside the accepted canons of artistic expression, and they suggested new ways of depicting the figure that weren't dressed up for the public consumption." Edward Lucy Smith said of Alan Jones, "Much of the basic material of earlier paintings came from the kinkier kind of girly magazine. Jones demonstrates outstanding inventiveness with both imagery and color, combining and recombining stringently patterned and freely painterly elements, breaking up human anatomy and rearranging it in new ways." And here we have Cheryl Zerlgen, dressed up to make fun of the Cupid dolls and the degrading connotations that sometimes are presented. Rose O'Neill, a Midwest native who had worked as a writer and illustrator in New York City, initially conceptualized the Cupid as a cartoon intended for a comic strip in 1909. According to O'Neill, the idea for the Cupids came to her in a dream. The comic, featuring the cherub-faced characters, was first printed in Ladies' Home Journal in the December 1909 issue. O'Neill described the characters as a sort of little round fairy whose one idea is to teach people to be merry and kind at the same time. Their name, often shortened to Cupids, derives from Cupid. As we enter into the section on aggression against women, I'd like to point out that the male fear of female aggression is often overmatched by sadistic impulses towards women. Although unsmiling, the women in these paintings of slave markets are posed seductively. There is no real evidence of fear, just calm resignation. Clearly, male fantasies are at work here. This painting depicts the mortal Castor and the immortal Pollux abducting Phoebe and Hilera, daughters of Leucippus of Messina. It's interesting that the facial expressions on the women don't seem as if they're in any great distress. Not to mention the Cupid that's behind the horse somehow indicates this rape was an act of love. Both women married their rapists and bore them children, exemplifying the common practice of marriage to save virtue. Félicien Ropes was a Belgian artist known primarily as a printmaker in etching and aquatint. He is noted for his drawings depicting the erotic and satanic themes. Note the orgasmic look on the woman's face and the spilled virginal blood. Origins of the devil made me do it, perhaps. If you study modern art history, you might learn that surrealists claim to revere and idolize women. Most of their art indicates otherwise, at least from my perspective. Art historian and critic Edward Lucy Smith tells us that the Surrealist artist sought to remake reality so that it became the perfect expression of his own fantasies. You can see that the rape by René Magritte is a head that is nothing more than genitalia, and supplies us with a very literal instance of surreal transformation. The book Ninth Street Women by Mary Gabriel is about the New York School of Art during the 1950s, and so the artists of the time would have had direct connection to Surrealist artists. Gabriel writes, "For Surrealists, women were muses, the embodiment of mystery, the angels, the erotic playthings, the objects of mad desire. Both saint and sinner, the wife was sexually liberated, but still the possession of her husband." Lucy Smith continues his discourse on surrealism with this: "Erotic imagery became an important weapon in the battle for modernism. It is not merely that artists seem to be expressing a fear of normal sexuality and a feeling of aggression towards women who threaten the male with her otherness. It's also that the audience itself is to be assaulted. By creating images which outrage conventional ideas of decency and sexual reticence, the artist marks the distance between himself and the ordinary members of society. Contemporary painters and sculptors also use erotic imagery as a means of involving the spectator with the work. It's difficult to confront such imagery with complete neutrality." Artemisia Gentileschi often painted herself into the Bible stories she depicted. Here, she presents herself as a martyr, perhaps Saint Catherine of Alexandria. Hers is the story of the first recorded court case on rape. She was raped by Agostino Tassi, a colleague of her father. After his deed, he promised to marry Artemisia to save her reputation and erase his crime. Because this was the standard practice of the time, Artemisia decided to continue the relationship with Tassi. It should be noted that this remains normal behavior for rape victims, aligning themselves with the aggressor. Then Tassi reneged on the marriage, and Artemisia's father brought a lawsuit against him, since women were not allowed to do so. Artemisia was not only viciously questioned, but later tortured to ensure she was telling the truth about the rape. During trial, it came out that Tassi had a long criminal record, had arranged for his previous wife to be murdered, and attempted to steal paintings from Artemisia's father. He was jailed for 1 whole year and then released. Artemisia went on to live a full life as an artist and a wife and a mother. She traveled extensively and was a court painter for the King of England, and included members of the Medici family and the Empress of Austria as her patrons. It's very difficult to decide how the viewer is intended to react to this sculptural grouping. Are we to believe the artist is making ironic commentary on the limited nature of contemporary eroticism? Or does the artist expect us to find some socially redeeming value? In any case, these pieces debuted to protests in 1970. Alan Jones said of his own work, "When I looked at what other avant-garde artists were doing with the figure, there was always a kind of prop, something that let the viewer off the hook, that told them this is a work of art. I wanted to make a figure that was devoid of those props. There was an idea I'd seen in an adult comic strip where a person was used as a table, and that set off a whole host of resonances." Although in this painting Frida was not responding specifically to Jones's furniture, I put it here because at least she's using the furniture as it was meant and has not become the furniture. Right after Frida Kahlo divorced Diego Rivera, she painted this self-portrait. Unlike other previous self-portraits in which Frida always wears feminine dresses, in this one she's wearing a large suit of black color which looks like one of Diego's. She also cut off her long hair, which has attracted Diego so much. She was holding scissors in her right hand, which meant she did it all by herself. In her left hand, she was holding her shorn hair, which is a symbol of her sacrifice. The wording at the top of the painting says, "See, if I loved you, it was for your hair. Now you're bald. I don't love you anymore." This issue about violence against women is expressed as perfectly okay and as a matter of righteousness, with the lesson that virtue is to triumph over pleasure at all times. Virtue is about to bash the naked pleasure with his club. The woman is presented in a barely active position with an upraised hand that looks more like she's trying to shield her eyes from the sun than save herself from a beating. But fortunately for her, our man Hercules is on the scene to ward off the blows. His gesture is rather limp and seems barely capable of warding off any kind of blow. The clubs, of course, are obvious phallic symbols. This painting depicts a woman in chains and in jail, with the shadow of her jailer on top of her shadow. Her blindfold is made from newspaper headlines of the time, and in the back are pin-ups from girly magazines. I completed this in response to the tailhook scandal of 1991. For those of you too young to remember, the tailhook scandal was an event that took place at a hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, where United States Navy and U.S. Marine Corps aviation officers sexually assaulted nearly 83 women and 7 men. The officers formed a gauntlet and groped, molested, or committed other sexual or physical assaults and harassment on those who walked through the hallway. I remember distinctly reports of some of the officers wearing t-shirts printed with the phrase, "Women are property." I also remember feeling completely enraged by the whole thing. Eroticism and the male desire to inflict pain on women as sexual stimulation is as old as history. The fact that the woman is tethered to the demon's tail is a direct reference to women having evil associations and that they deserve what they get as punishment. And here we have our courtesan just asking for it, as she sits blithely astride a cannon, a temptress look on her face and a welcoming gesture with the outstretched hand, while the dutiful soldier uses a tamping rod on her. And more often than not, women are depicted as completely enjoying the activity. Look at how calmly this woman takes her abuse. The implication, of course, is that this is what she wants, and the demons belong to her, not men. They are blameless. And nothing is more erotic than having women go at it together. The Adventures of Gwendolyn is a cartoon adventure series and part of American fetish art. When women create pieces about pain and suffering, it looks a lot different. Katie Kolowitz is a master portraitist, and because she lived through 2 world wars and lost her sons in World War II, she is no stranger to pain and suffering. The title of this piece pretty much says it all. Hung on a gallery wall or behind a vitrine, the viewer is confronted with the implications and intent of the work. The confluence of delicacy and glamour associated with a peignoir, and the violent acrimony of steel wool challenges preconceived notions that typically associate the feminine with softness or fragility. This work is emblematic of the artist's interest in the subjects of domesticity, signifiers of femininity, and recontextualization of objects. Frida Kahlo is showing us her pain in this work. It's real medical pain that has nothing to do with sexual conquest or the need to dominate another. It's also a painting about inner strength and endurance, with a smattering of the martyr mixed in. Matushka, birth name Joanne Motichka, is a New York City photographer, artist, author, activist, and model. Her self-portrait on the Sunday cover of the New York Times Magazine in 1993 was chosen by Life for a special edition entitled 100 Photographs That Changed the World. In 1995, Greenpeace commissioned Matushka to create a poster directed at Time Life to cease using chlorinated paper. We see here that Matushka is a cancer survivor. 22 years after her mastectomy operation, she began breast reconstruction using a new experimental system of fat grafting, a procedure that required 6 hospitalizations over a 3-year period. She brought public awareness to this pain specific to women through a special aired by CBS News Sunday morning entitled The Model and the Mastectomy. And lastly, I leave you with another kind of pain, that of the political back and forth on the pro-life and pro-choice issue. This piece is a 3-dimensional painting using medical gauze and wire hangers as the mother's headdress. and was meant to bring awareness to those caught between the loud and often passionate discourse on difficult issues. Thank you for joining me today. My one big hope is that from this presentation, you begin to see things through a more enlightened position, that you begin to look at images presented to you with a curious and open mind, and perhaps develop a healthy recognition that you don't have to absorb images as your own truth. You and you alone are responsible for your own truth.